Hi, Abhishek. First of all, let me just introduce myself. My name is Harshit. I run a community, a film community on Instagram and Facebook. It's called Homes of Cinema. Ona works with me.
Hi.
Both of us write about films. Of course, we conduct this podcast. And the whole idea is that we talk about film and we talk about the impact of cinema. And it's just interesting that your film also happens to be about the impact of cinema in some way or the other. So, like, we're super excited to have this chat. So, first of all, thank you so much, Abhishek. I'm a big, big fan. And I think I speak for Ahuna as well.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you are just one of my favorite filmmakers from India, from all over the world, and it's such a pleasure. So first of all, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Um, Abhishek, so again, at Humans of Cinema, because we talk about film and the impact of cinema, first of all, I would like to ask you, what are the films that have had the deepest influence on your life while growing up that probably made you want to be a filmmaker? What is that one film, or let's say a couple of films that almost like had a really deep impact on your life?
It's always a very difficult question. I grew up in UP and Bihar. Okay, I grew up in cities like Lucknow and Patna and Ranchi, Jamshedpur. There was very little access to Hollywood, leave alone cinema from other parts of the world. So, and I was very young when the idea to become a filmmaker germinated in my head. I don't think even it was pre-teen as a matter of fact, and I wanted to be a filmmaker. So definitely, what got me there was the staple Bollywood mainstream film. I mean, watching what is the darkest decade of our cinema, the 1980s. I mean,
Yes.
I was watching those films and I somehow decided to be a filmmaker, God knows why. The thing is that I think what really got me was there were very few films on television as well, except for the Sunday screening that Doordarshan used to show. I mean, I'm talking about pre-satellite TV. And so the experience of going inside a theater and in a dark room with hundreds of people and watching movies which are completely different from your regular life, I think that really got to me as a young kid. So, I mean, instead of saying that there was at that point in time, if there was any one or two, of course, you enjoyed the Bachchan films, and of course, I would say my favorite film of all time at that time would be Disco Dancer or something. But I think more than anything else, it was the experience of watching, movies in the movie theater, and it was the cinematic language of all the films that I saw of that era that really, really, influenced me a lot. But and I wanted to become a part of this world. But really, it was when I went out, when I left home and I went to a boarding school and then subsequently a college and all of that. And I got exposed to cinema from other parts of the world. Is that when, sort of the light bulb popped in my head where I started looking at it as an art form. So it was then, then when you saw in cinema from all across the world, that really, got me. So I'm saying one or two favorite films. I mean, I would say 500 or 1,000 favorite films. I mean, that's the number. I mean, and if one, I'm cheating on the other. It's almost like that.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite filmmakers would be, some of the European masters and the American masters like Scorsese or Bergman or something like that. That's the kind of cinema you saw and said, "Oh, this is what it is, really."
Yeah. No,
Right.
we totally understand the feeling. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Abhishek, but when you were starting off, when you were leaving your city, and when you decided that you want to be a filmmaker, did you have like a slight kind of a map in your head about the kind of films that you want to make, or was it just a voice that you developed as you kept going?
A bit of both. I mean, but when I came to Bombay, there was no other place in India where I could make films. I mean, so therefore I came to Bombay. It was as simple as that. And I was heavily influenced by the kind of films I was watching back then. I did not go to any film school, so watching film was educational for me. And that was what really taught me most things. So I thought it was possible. I was naive. I thought it was possible to make a movie like Paul Thomas Anderson or whatnot. But when I came to Bombay, I think when I saw movies like Bandit Queen and Satya, which were classics of the 90s, that really influenced me a lot. And that sort of gave me a direction. Oh, this is possible.
Hmm.
This can be
Right.
done. I mean, so that was very encouraging. I mean, Satya was the first film I saw when I came to Bombay, and it was huge. I thought it was auspicious. You land in Bombay to make movies. The first movie that you see is Satya. So that had a
Right.
profound impact in my early days in Bombay. Because I thought I
Hmm.
think in the mainstream space, I think it broke quite a few rules, and I think that was great. But I also have to give a lot. A lot came from the experience of working in the industry and learning
Yes.
about what it is, learning about the craft, and therefore growing up and understanding what kind of filmmaker I'd be. So it was all of these that finally made me the kind of filmmaker.
Hmm.
Right. So this entire idea in your that you just talked about, films encouraging a person to look at the world in a certain way or to look at the art of cinema in a certain way. This actually translates very directly to this film
Yeah. Yeah.
because these two characters are just so influenced by cinema. They have no plan B also. Like cinema is their be all and end all. And the way they're looking at it, it's almost like it facilitates escape. So was that a very conscious transition that you were making from your own experience into this film?
This is based on a short story by Ankahi Kahaniya called Madhyantara. It's a Kannada short story. And
Okay.
one of the things that really uh, got me when I read this, when I read the short story was the story is somewhere about escape. It's about freedom. And don't we all say that movies are escapist in nature?
Absolutely.
So these two guys who have you can safely say miserable lives that they're living, and most people in Mumbai, from a less privileged economic background, I mean, have miserable lives. I mean, it's really hard, their lives. And I mean, let's give credit where it's due. Our movies, what we uh, who are more artistically inclined, we very derisively call escapist cinema. I mean, boss, it's much needed, to
Absolutely.
escape the
Yes.
drudgery of life. I mean, that, and how it affects us is deeper than we think. What we call escapist cinema, because it gives us ideas, it gives us meaning to our lives, it gives us images and gives us dreams. And that's what the story was saying, that cinema as a means of escape, and it was literally saying that. So
Right.
what the story does is literally it is cinema and love found within the confines of a cinema theater that gives the strength to these two characters to
Hmm.
escape the shit life they're living. So I think that was wonderful interpretation of what we think of mainstream cinema. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when you say that that these people are living these miserable lives, and this is something that I've noticed very particularly about your cinema, something that I find extremely beautiful about it is that even when you're showing misery, even when you're showing these starkly real conditions, these just harrowing situations that people are living through, it's never completely hopeless. There's always this little bit of
Yeah.
hope that people are holding on to. How do you manage to do that? Because that's frankly very difficult to do.
I think that's. I mean, this is my personal belief, and I could be completely wrong, but my personal belief is that there is nothing like utter and complete despair. Now, I'm not saying it does not happen. What I mean to say is when a complete and utter despair, a complete and utter darkness with absolutely no light, is a mental state which is very close to insanity. And I think as long as your head is still attached to your shoulders, there will always be hope, there will always be that glimmer, there will always be some mental calculation that how I will get out of this situation. So
Right.
life is not binary in terms of happiness and sadness. I think it's always a mix of various things. Even at our bleakest hour, we hope to fight it out. Therefore, I mean, when you look at Alia's character in Udta Punjab, like suffering like nobody's business, still finds hope in an advertisement billboard. I mean, so that's why I genuinely feel like that even when things are completely. I mean, I'm just reiterating what I actually said. Complete and utter despair is depression, which is a clinical state.
Right.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
there's always hope.
Yeah. And I just want to add something, not a question, but just when we are talking about hope that we can see in the characters in your films. I mean, I've seen that so many of your characters, they have at least one like small dream sequence which might represent something. But like even in the Manoj Bajpayee film in Ray, of course, wo to alag hi tha. He to kept having dream sequences again and again. But in this film also, there were dream sequences that were powered by their love for Bollywood. In Sonchiriya, of course, we had that beautiful dream sequence with Sushant. And I mean, that is something that really, really always, like in all of your films, it always gets me. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add that. Also, one more thing that was very interesting is in the beginning of the film, especially, and actually throughout the film, because like the movie theater plays such an important part in your film. The sounds around the movie theater, they also become extremely significant, and it's very obvious that you have put in a lot of effort into getting that right. How conscious of a choice was that, like in order to kind of create that atmosphere of like being inside the movie theater?
It was absolutely critical that we do that, and in fact, choosing the right location where I could create that ambience was very important. The great thing about South Bombay is that, you still find these old single screen theaters uh, still in pristine condition. I mean, of advanced decay, but still functioning. So we found such a location, and I specifically wanted to talk about the film culture, the film watching culture of this city back then. So
Yes.
there's a little detail, in the story that you see behind the characters. You see banners and posters talking about the mill worker strike, which was happening back
Yes.
then.
Yes.
And all these theaters in South Mumbai specifically catered to the mill working, the mill people, the folks who work,
Okay.
their families used to come and watch movies over there. So I wanted to create that era, that time, and that was very important to me. I mean, world building, creating a world for the audiences to consume is one of the most exciting things I do as a filmmaker. I mean, that really gets me really inspired and interested in doing something, because it's a learning process. You learn something about that world, and then you tell the audience. So I have always enjoyed doing that in my movies, and I think this was one of the things in this story that really attracted me, and got me.
Hmm. Yeah. You never mention in the film explicitly that it is set in the 80s or the 70s, right? It's just something that we have to kind of.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
have to piece it together. I mean, even if we don't sort of come out of the film not consciously knowing this is 1985 or whatever, it's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it gives you a
Yeah,
sense
it's
of
a
time and place. Yeah.
true. It's a story that endures that entire, that timeline thing, because it's true in either way. Like it's true of any timeline. These people finding hope in cinema.
Yeah.
And I think the mainstream cinema part was the part where you understand that this is located slightly in some other era, not this one.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's actually it holds true throughout. Yeah.
That also, and also, I think there was a very conscious, like very small sequence where these two are going, like they're roaming around the beach, and I think it just felt very similar to Basu Chatterjee films.
Absolutely. The reference was Bato Bato mein Amol Palekar and Tina Muneem. They were
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes, exactly. I mean, yeah,
shot exactly there.
yeah. I noticed that.
Right.
Yeah, it was
Right.
beautiful. It was beautiful to look at. Your film is about, like, the impact of cinema on this country, on the people of this country, right? And it's kind of a tribute to it. It's kind of a tribute, like almost like a love letter to cinema, but at the same time, it's a commentary on the impact of cinema on our lives, right? Like we grow up with these unrealistic expectations because of whatever we see in films, but then it kind of puts a new spin to the kind of the boy meets girl story that we have seen over the years. But you're saying that this was there in the short film. Oh, sorry, in the short story that's based on.
Yeah, it was a part of the short story. I mean, there are some critical changes that I made to the short story in translating it to film. But yeah, the primary story as you watch is the same.
Okay. But like, I'm just curious, like, what do you think is, with everything that we've been through, like, with all the history that we have had with cinema over the years, what do you think at this current point, what is the purpose of cinema in our lives and in the kind of the socio-political context of this country? What do you think, how do you think cinema plays out at this moment in our lives?
Well, that's a very vast question, and I'll try to rush through it. In the sense that cinema has the same purpose that any art has. I mean, what is the purpose of any art?
Hmm.
And it can be expressed variously. But what I would like to say is that definitely cinema, like any other art form, is an individual expression, and who they are, and where they are and how they are. It shows, it is a document of the times that we live in. It is a document of the people who lived through these times. I find it very, specious when filmmakers carry agendas of changing the world and all of that. My movie and my work of art is going to change the world.
Hmm.
The thing is that art changes the world, and it does so without you having to do anything about it. You know,
Yeah.
we, I think as filmmakers, we just have to go ahead and speak our mind. And it's very hard to hide yourself when you make a movie. Who you are is going to get revealed no matter what you do. I mean, I don't think filmmakers
Hmm.
are philanthropists, that they're doing any favors to the audience. They're making exactly what they like to watch.
Yes. Yes.
So in that sense, art is a document of our times. I mean, and given the state of news media today, I think they're a truer document of our times than than even the press.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Also, the end of this film, I trying to talk about it with like without giving away any spoilers, but it's such a beautiful ending because it opens the story up to so many possibilities as to where these two people are going.
Yeah.
And that I think is a very good spin on the kind of cinema that tells you this is exactly what it is. Like this is a happy ending and this is a happily ever after. So how did you manage to sort of tell the or put the spin on this very, I would say, very popular trope of boy meets girl?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the wonderful things about the story when I read it, because most love stories are about, when you watch a love story, when you read a love story, I mean, it's about the grand love affair of a human being's life,
Hmm.
and the big thing in that, oh, boy meets girl and they get married, and or girl meets boy and their heart is broken, one of them dies or one of them goes away, and oh my god, it's all sad. you know
Yeah.
this is the love story. This is not their grand love. This is not the grandest love affair they're going to have. Yeah, but when we talk about, when you love somebody, you set them free, or when you talk about things like love as something that gives you strength, this is what the story does, because these two wonderful kids, are quite unhappy in their life, and it is their, meeting inside the movie theater, they're falling for each other, that gives them the strength, to be able to do what really they really want to do with their lives. I mean, the reason it's a quintessentially Bombay story is because these are Bombay kids, and Bombay people are thorough professionals. They're go-getters. They go out and do what they want. So these kids, through this sort of romantic interlude in their life, find the necessary courage to be able to get up and do what they want. They hold each other's hands and they walk the distance, which is finally going to take them to their final destination. But it's not with each other, and so be it, but love conquered something in this case. So also one of the wonderful ironical things I liked about the story is that most stories about Bombay are stories about coming to Bombay,
Okay.
and this
Right.
story was about leaving it.
Yes.
But it was
Right. Right.
wonderfully ironical. So yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
I'll just ask one last question about the film, and it's about. And it's also kind of a personal. It's almost like a personal question that I'm asking you, because like I'm an aspiring filmmaker, and one of the things that I'm still like struggling with while I'm writing is that I still make it very dialogue heavy, and this was a film that was very heavy on imagery, and these are the kind of films that I like also personally, like for example the film The Wong Kar Wai, which are so heavy on imagery, and your film also, it kind of really stuck out because of the imagery that was so pleasant to see and almost tells the whole film through images. So how do you write such a film which has such little dialogue and it's mostly about the moments?
yeah, one of the challenges of this film was, to take the short story and make a script out of it, because one of the advantages of writing a short story, in literature, is that it's very easy to talk about what's happening within a character's head and without what's happening in front of you.
Yes.
you have the stream of consciousness technique, and you can talk about what's happening in the character's head. It becomes harder in the movies. I mean, and if you use something like a voiceover to truly depict what's happening in the character's head, I mean, it's a crutch. So this was one of the challenges when we were adapting this. Hussein Hedri, who's my co-writer, we discussed this at length, and we decided that the structure of the film is going to be a sort of a montage, intercutting montage of two parallel lives, where you just see them go through the motions, of their daily life. But it's not a parallel cut as much as one on top of each other, so that it develops a narrative. So, so that was the challenge, and it was a challenge. I call it a challenge because, I mean, we brought it to a certain extent in the script. I mean, we wrote it out with this in mind, so that, every image of the boy and then the girl and then the boy again and the girl again, sort of develops the narrative until they meet in the theater, and you have these few scenes that happen in the middle which propel the story forward. But it had to be rewritten at the editing stage because, our first cut with everything that I had shot was about 50 minutes long, so it was much longer than the film needed to be. So we had to pare down a lot of things. We had to, we had to leave out of quite a few moments, and then we had to reconnect, and we had to play with structure. So it was something that I had to rewrite. The nature of the story was such that, I think editing was not just putting all this stuff together, as it had been completely reimagined.
Almost the entire film got made at the editing table. It's almost like that.
Also, yeah. So there was one thing that we went ahead with in the script, and then it had to be interpreted at another level while editing it. And unfortunately for me, I had the time because I shot the film just when the pandemic broke through in Bombay. So when we wrapped was when lockdown was announced in Bombay. So we had all this time during the lockdown where, Sayukta and I could, work on the edit remotely. And that's what, I mean, we had to bring it down to 50 to what its eventual length is, which is 32 minutes, I think. So, yeah, it was a learning experience. It's much harder, to do films that work just on image, songs and dialogue. It's much harder, but I've gotten a taste of it in this film, and I know how rewarding it is, and I'd like to do more of that.
Okay. Ovana, do you want to ask one last question before we wrap up?
I do. So I wanted to ask you that if as the storyteller in this very special story about two people who have ordinary lives and this very extraordinary courage that they draw from cinema, how would you envision that their journey in the end pans out? How would you say that their life goes on after the?
I have ended the story, I believe, with a note of hope. And I think what I've given what I've given is a small victory, to both these characters, and I think, and this is, I mean, I have lived in Bombay more than I've lived in any other part of the world. I find Bombay people very enterprising. It's one of the most efficient cities. People, and I'm not talking about the rich and the famous here. I'm talking about the man on the street, the woman on the street. I mean, I find them terribly efficient. And I think, in my view, I think nothing's stopping these guys. I mean, in my view, these guys are going to go out and be able to make something of themselves, for sure.
Right.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Abhishek. It was a big pleasure again. I mean, you were just like one of the people that I really wanted to host on my podcast, and like it's almost like a wish list has been checked today. But thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.
This is Avona and Harshit signing off from the Gimzo Cinema podcast. Bye.
Bye.